Welcome to my kitchen. I'm alone in remote Alaska, and today I want to share with you a classic recipe with a couple different variations that I'm hoping that you'll give a try this holiday season. Today's recipe was actually inspired by this pan that has been hanging up behind me in some of my recent videos, and some of my viewers have asked what this particular pan is all about. Well, this pan is actually a cornbread pan. It's made so that you can make up a loaf of cornbread and have individual servings. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you, though, a brownie recipe.
If you're like me, then you want that corner piece from the pan of brownies. But by cooking it in this cornbread pan, you're guaranteed to get a corner piece every time.
And if you're familiar with cooking brownies, you know that you have to grease and flour your pan so that the brownies come out easily. Well, because I'm using cast iron, what I decided to do instead was just go ahead and line this with some parchment paper. And all I did was lay some parchment paper down on my cutting board. I flipped over my mixing bowl, traced around the bowl itself, folded the parchment paper into halves and then quarters and then eighths, and cut that apart with some scissors. And then I cut some additional 1/2-inch strips that I've just tacked down with some cold butter, which I have then used to line the edges of each of these wedges. And that way I don't have to grease and flour this particular pan. And I know that my brownies are gonna come right out of here. When I was growing up, my family always made brownies from a store-bought mix. It wasn't until I got much older that I realized that I didn't have to go to the store to buy brownie mix in order to make one of my favorite desserts. And so today I want to show you how simple it is to just go ahead and make a classic recipe of brownies. But then I want to share with you a couple different variations on this. In order to make the classic brownie recipe, you'll need the following ingredients: 1 cup of granulated white sugar, 1/2 cup of butter, 1/2 cup of flour, 2/3 cup cocoa powder, 2 whole eggs, 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder, 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla, and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. For today's recipe though, I'm adding in 1/2 cup of dried cranberries, a tablespoon of orange zest, and a tablespoon of Cointreau. You can leave the Cointreau out if you don't have this or you're not a fan of using alcohol. And then at the end, I'll share with you another version of this recipe that you can make that be more suitable to small children, something that they might enjoy a little bit more than this adult version of brownies. If you're making this at home with a conventional oven, you'll want to preheat to 350 degrees, and then your brownies are going to take between 13 and 17 minutes to cook fully. If you're doing it like I am on top of the wood stove, what you might want to do is lay down some type of a rack that can provide some air circulation underneath your pan. And then you're going to want to provide some type of cover. In my case, I'm using a roaster as my oven. And I'll just slide my brownie tray in there, close that up, and then I'll need to keep a close eye on this because the heat is going to fluctuate. While it says that it is about 300 degrees on top of the stovetop, believe it or not, that means it's about 500 degrees inside of my oven right now. So my brownies might take a little less time than yours, or I might have to rotate them a bit more to make sure that they cook evenly. To start this recipe, you're going to want to melt your 1 stick of butter. And you want that to cool just slightly. I don't recommend that you do this in the microwave because when you do that, the fats or the oils separate from the milk solids, and then you wind up with a greasy product. So if ever you've melted butter in the microwave and then say you went to go make cookies and you can't understand why your cookies are kind of greasy, that's why. So I recommend that you do this over the stovetop or in a double boiler, and that you do it slowly. That way you don't have that separation of the two. Now that my butter has cooled just slightly, I'm going to add in my 2 eggs. And I'm going to beat that just slightly. You don't want to overbeat your eggs, otherwise you could wind up with a tough brownie. And to that, I'm going to go ahead and add in my 1 cup of sugar, the 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla, and I'm just going to eyeball this here. So just a splash is all it's going to take. I'm also going to go ahead and add in my Cointreau. The Cointreau will just help to add in some additional flavor. And I'm gonna go ahead and add in my orange zest at this moment as well. And I'm just going to go ahead and mix all that together. And then to that, I'm gonna go ahead and add in my dry ingredients. I'm gonna start with my flour, cocoa powder, our baking powder, and our salt. And we're gonna go ahead and just mix that up until everything is combined and all our dry ingredients are moistened. And then next, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna fold in my cranberries. What I'm gonna do is I'm just going to go ahead and scoop some of my brownie mixture into each one of these wedges and just kind of spread it around. It will spread on its own with the heat of the oven. So I'm going to go ahead and pull my roaster off the top. I'm going to throw my brownies right on that rack. This is going to cook, like I said, for about 13 to 17 minutes in your traditional oven. So while that's cooking, I'm going to go ahead and clean up my kitchen and I'll check back in with you in a moment. A couple ways that you can tell that your brownies are done, regardless of how you decide to cook them, is one, when they start to pull away from the edges of the pan, that is a good indicator that they are done. When you start to see that they've got a shiny top to them and it has that little bit of a crackle on top, the color is a slightly lighter brown in tone than the rest of the brownies, that's also a good indicator that they're done. Or if you smell the brownies, that's also a good indicator. And unfortunately, you can't really do a poke test because brownies are a chewy dessert. And once you stick that toothpick or cake tester in there, the batter is just gonna stick to that. And so there's not really a way of testing like that to see if they're done. Now, a few minutes ago, I went ahead and sprinkled on the top of this some granulated sugar and some additional orange zest. And I just let that caramelize over the top of these brownies. But I'm gonna go ahead and pull these off and we're gonna let these cool down before we serve them up.
Now I went ahead and made a second batch of brownies using the same classic recipe, only this time instead of adding in the cranberry and the oranges and the Cointreau, I cooked the brownies as normal, and then just before finishing them, I sprinkled over some miniature marshmallows and let those melt down and roast up on top.
There you go, a classic brownie recipe made two different ways. No matter how you make this, I hope you'll make it your own. Maybe add some crushed walnuts as my mother did, or some crushed toffee or crushed peppermint. But if you make it in this cornbread pan, everybody is guaranteed to get that corner piece that they're looking for. Oh yeah, this one is my favorite. That's really good. This is definitely for somebody who has a very sweet tooth, but this one is a little bit less sweet and has some more developed flavors in it. Either way, I hope that you will try this recipe, and I wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Until next time, stay safe. And if you're interested in some additional cooking videos from me, check these out here. And if you would like to see my weekly vlog, check out this playlist here. Sorry, big guy. You can't have a brownie. No. You want a biscuit? Yeah, that's what I thought.